Hi spooky friends, welcome to my channel, Kelly Does Stuff. I have a spooktacular project that I'm going to share with you today that will have you mining for some supplies to build your own Halloween display village. Currently, I'm in the middle of creating a project involving pool noodles. I've never worked with that before and it's going interestingly.
Real quick tip, you guys, don't get that foam glue in your hair.
So that project is going to take a little while to complete. So what I thought I would do is share with you something that I made last year. And with the exception of just a few filler platforms, the Lemax brand platforms, that are your kind of basic styrofoam with a moth on top, I make all of my platforms and displays. One of the display pieces I'm most excited to show you is the platform that I made for this Lemax, what's it called? Oh, so clever. W-E, but we slab 'em, Tombstone Quarry. Quarry? What is it? Quarry. Last year was the first year I added a bayou section to my Halloween village. This was a brand new section. I don't think I even had one piece. And at the end of the year, I ended up with a lot. So the love of collecting Halloween pieces really came from my dad. So when I was growing up, he had a Halloween village and I just totally fell in love with it. He had a Christmas village and they were both just so magical and you really wanted to be there. As an adult, I began collecting and the village just is really growing over the years, especially because he and I are totally obsessed and we kind of like feed off of each other's excitement. So he and I together really built this collection for the bayou. And so I was talking to him constantly. I'm like, I'm creating this and I'm the swamp and the trees and the thingy-dings and all that. The bayou was kind of going up into what I was calling the haunted hill section and like kind of other things like around it in the woods and like what other part. And my dad said, you know, you really think that there would be some sort of mine piece. And I was like, yes, that like a haunted mine seems totally obvious. All of a sudden one day I'm on eBay. The Tombstone piece came up and we were like, perfect, we gotta do it. So whenever I'm creating a platform, I'm always inspired by the piece itself. Sometimes it will just be a little element or detail that will really dictate or give me a direction of where I wanna go to create a platform. For this piece, I knew that I wanted to make something like an abandoned mine. So a mine that's like underground. So we're basically gonna stick the quarry inside a mine. And we can do that. Because it's our imagination. Really seen an abandoned mine in real life. So I turned to the internet and I just did a search of abandoned mines, creepy mines, anything that I liked from the different pictures, I just put them all together. I don't care if it doesn't exist in real life because it exists in my animation and I'm going to make it real life. Angel, you have something you wanted to say? Angel, yes, thank you so much for reminding all of our spooky friends to subscribe to my channel. And speaking of that, thank you so much and welcome to all of my subscribers. Let's just go ahead and get into what I did and how I did it to create the mine piece, the mine display piece for the Lemax piece. Tripped on the chair. I was gonna have this running, but it does make a little bit of sound. And if you saw the video where I created the vignette for $30 or less, I filmed outside and the crickets were screaming. So anyway, it's such a great piece. And so I just wanted to show that to you. And we're going to create a mine.
I started out with 9 pieces of XPS styrofoam that I buy at Home Depot. I used the Lemax piece to help me determine how much of the center of the styrofoam I'm going to carve out. I use a hot wire tool to do the carving. This is a freeform router I got at Hot Wire Foam Factory. They have a lot of great hot wire tools on their website as well as tips and tricks for how to make great projects out of foam. Don't worry if you don't have a foam cutter. You can use a knife or a blade and sometimes I think those work faster. I'm constantly switching between both of those tools. You'll see here I kept putting the Lemax piece up against the styrofoam just to double check my measurements. I'm a huge fan of the guesstimates and this looks close enough because planning is boring and I'd rather do the bare minimum so I can get to the fun. When using a foam cutter, always work in a well-ventilated area. Before working with any materials, I always do my own research on what feels safe for me. What works for me might not work for somebody else. Remember the water from the inspiration photos? It was time to incorporate that detail into the styrofoam. Once again, I used my freeform router. This is a great tool because you can bend it into any shape you want. Just make sure that you are bending that wire when it's not plugged in because it's a hot wire and yep, it's hot. If you saw my video where I created the vignette for under $30, you know that a rock is a great way to add texture to your pieces, and XPS foam will take the texture of anything that you put on it. I mean, pretty much anything. Here I'm adding texture to the underside of the roof of the mine and also to the base. I think the greatest piece of advice I might have for village making is to save all of your styrofoam scraps, like all of them, because you can do so many things with your scraps. Here I cut some scraps into the shape of rocks that I painted with black and silver acrylic paint. And if you're thinking spray paint would be so much faster, that is true, except with one big caveat. A very important thing to know about styrofoam is that spray paint will eat through it, which can actually be a really cool effect. And now that I'm saying that, I think I might try it for some rocks. But just make sure that that's the effect you're going for. Remember our inspiration photo with the stalactites hanging down? Well, I wanted to do something kind of like that, but with sparkles. So I coated my rocks in Mod Podge and then rolled them around in this sparkly pinkish purple decorative filler by Ashland that I got from Michaels. Next, it was time to paint the individual layers of styrofoam with the base coat. This process is capital B boring because there's no real creativity to it, but it's definitely necessary. Thankfully though, I got to follow that mega boredom up with something super fun, applying plaster to the area I carved out that is going to be our water. This is the first time I worked with this material and I kind of fell in love. The reason I needed to do this was because of another new material I was working with, Realistic Water by Woodland Scenic. This product will also eat through your styrofoam. Ask me how I know that. I'm sure that information is right on the bottle, but you know how I feel about planning. And then of course, before you can paint, you have to let it dry completely. And no matter how long you stare at it or ask it, are you dry yet? It doesn't seem to speed up the drying process. Once it was dry though, I had so much fun painting my water so many shades of blue. Buckle up, spooky friends. It's about to get rocky. I reached for my scrap styrofoam again and began carving 9 million rocks out of styrofoam. And then I used my hot glue gun to glue them all into place. You know what else will eat into styrofoam? Hot glue. If you can, get a glue gun that has a high and low setting. Sometimes the low setting is a little bit too low, but if you're on the high setting and that glue starts to boil and bubble, you can bump it back down and continue working. Yay! It's plaster time again. The plaster that I bought came in a long roll, and then I cut it into sheets of about 8 to 12 inches before I began working. This was just a manageable size for me to work with. And when I first did this, I would try to stretch my sheet as far as it could go. But what that ended up doing was just kind of draping over the rocks, and I lost all of the relief in the detail. So really take your time shoving it into all those little nooks and crannies. Also, the plaster is like a mesh. It's got kind of that grid pattern with all the little lines and holes that you can smooth out with your finger. But if you find that you need some filler, good news, return to your bucket of water and scoop out all of the little bits of plaster that have accumulated on the bottom. This is a great way to smooth out and fill any areas that need a little extra plaster love. Okay, spooky friends, there's no way around it, but we have to let that plaster dry, and it's probably going to take a day or so. Wondering what to do while you're waiting? Angel has some ideas. Those are great ideas, Angel. You know what else is a good idea to do while your plaster is drying? Dry brush the inside of the platform. All those layers of styrofoam that I painted black, I'm now going over with a gray color. Dry brushing is where you take a dry paintbrush, dip the tip of it in paint, and then I wipe a lot of it off. You want just a little bit of paint on the tip of your brush, and then you're going to quickly and kind of roughly swipe it over the surface of whatever it is you're painting. And you can see here how the details, all of that carving I did into the styrofoam really begins to pop. And I do this with several shades of gray. You can see there that I had already put down a darker gray color. I had waited for that to completely dry, then going back in with a lighter gray, and then even some white on certain areas. It was time to add some more sparkles to the underside of my roof. I taped off the area and then applied a layer of Mod Podge. I got my shiny, sparkly pink purple stuff and I sprinkled it on top of the glue. Next, it's time to turn some strips of styrofoam into wood. I think this is one of the coolest effects that you can get with styrofoam. I will do a detailed video on how to create wood planks. Otherwise, if I do it here, you're just gonna be staring at a lot of brown strips and you'll be more bored than I was applying a base coat. Before I glued my pieces of styro wood in place, it was time to glue all those sparkly rocks I made to the top of the sparkly roof I made. And there they are. Sparkles! Just what every mine quarry needs. Once all the paint on my styro wood was dry, it was time to glue it in place inside of the mine quarry with hot glue, and it was very important that the hot glue gun be on the low setting for this. Before I glued everything into place, I tested it about 1,000 times to see if that was exactly where I wanted it to go. If you look closely, you'll notice that there are some ledges inside of the little cave. This is where some of the pieces of styrofoam stick out a little bit farther, and this provided a great anchoring point for some of my styro sticks. It's hard to believe it's true, but it is finally time to paint that plaster. This was one of the most anticipated parts of the project for me. I couldn't wait to see what these rocks looked like. The process was the same as for painting styrofoam in terms of doing a dark base coat. I used acrylic paint for this, and I mixed a brown and a black paint until I arrived at the color brown that I wanted. While the paint was still wet, I went in with a lighter brown color to give some more depth and dimension to the rocks. And then once again, you just gotta wait around for that paint to dry. Then you can go in with your dry brushing, using just a little bit of paint on a very dry brush and skimming over the surface of your rocks. This is where you really start to bring out the detail and see the reward of all of your hard work. And now with the magic of moss, you get to accent all of your hard work and cover up any mistakes. Use a hot glue gun to apply it and be really careful because that hot glue is hot. To give yourself a little buffer from the heat of the glue, grab much more moss than you're actually going to need. Press it in, and then when that glue dries, you can remove any extra moss that you don't want. And here we are, spooky friends. I'm so excited to say that we have arrived at the end. I'm applying the final pieces to the project. Let's take a close-up look at some of those details. So what do you guys think? I just absolutely loved sharing this project with you, and it was such a blast to make. Have you made anything like this? Let me know if you're thinking about making something like this. As always, if you've got any ideas or tips, please share those in the comments. And of course, let me know if you have any questions about the project. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so and share this with 5 or 10 spooky friends. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time. Happy creating!